personally, I had gone through a lot of changes. My 20-year marriage ended. I had 3 kids in junior high and high school. All at the same time, COVID hit. George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. Really, to me, the biggest change, a change from which we still have not recovered. And with all this happening, my peers on air, who think very differently than I do, and that's fine. However, they began to express their opinions on air. And then they decided that they're gonna have a race and sport special and have all, most of the, I guess, prominent or the main SportsCenter anchors come together on a panel. And it wasn't just SportsCenter, it was NFL Live, and it was reporters who were gonna come together, all black, on a panel to speak about race and sport. And no one told me about it. I found out through a friend of a friend, white people at ESPN, who said, just so you know, they're having this race and sports special with all your black peers. And I heard someone, one of the people that was gonna be moderating, laughing that she made sure that you weren't a part of it. At the time, I was the longest tenured female SportsCenter anchor at the network. Linda Cohn was still there, but not doing SportsCenter at the time, and she's incredible, by the way. She was one of my idols growing up. But I was the longest tenured female otherwise. I was the only woman of color doing SportsCenter full-time at that point. I was the highest paid female at the network. And for some reason, I was excluded from that. And I found out, and I called the president, who I had a good relationship with, and I said, Jimmy, what's going on? And he said, I don't know anything about that. Long story short, I was excluded. And I found out that 2 of the anchors went to the bosses and said, she is not respected in the black community. She's not black enough to be part of this panel. I said that and a few other things, I'm sorry. And then I'm like, please tell me what exactly that means to not be black enough. Granted, I'm biracial, I'm half white, so I guess I'm not, do the math here. I mean, tell me what the qualifications are. It had nothing to do with that, because as a biracial woman, I'm darker than some of the people who are all black on that network. It was about what I believed. And that devastated me. But I didn't say a word to anyone else. Somehow it leaked, and I got a call from the Wall Street Journal. And it was a moment for me. And I talked to my agent at the time, who was incredible. And he said, Sage, this might be the time. And at that moment, I knew that I wasn't just going to ignore the call from the Wall Street Journal. And I released a statement talking about diversity and equity and inclusion, and first and foremost, to me, the way I was raised, that begins with diversity of thought. Apparently, that's not what my bosses thought, but I knew at that moment that was a turning point, and that once I do that and go against my bosses, that things are gonna change. But fortunately, I had a contract. 2021, everything continued to go south, in my opinion. Disney was one of many companies that forced a vaccine in order for us to keep our jobs. We had until September 30th, 2021 to be fully vaccinated or you're gone. And I just wanted to know more. I wasn't anti-vax, I just wanted a little more time. A simple Google search told me that it usually takes 6 to 9 years for the FDA to approve a vaccine, and this was in 6 months. And when Donald Trump said it, we're not gonna touch that. But when Joe Biden got in and said it, then if you don't, then you're evil. So it didn't take much for me to connect the dots to realize that this wasn't about saving lives, and I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do something to my body, my choice, right? Sometimes. So I asked my agent, and they said, you're gonna have to do it. I asked my bosses, you're gonna have to do it. One of them said, you know what, my agent, you can do a religious exemption. And I said, but that's not the truth for me. It's just wrong to force someone to do that. Why am I gonna make it up? And they said, well, you can get out of it. Or you can do a medical exemption. I'm go, but that's not true. Like, I wanna do this for the right reason. I don't agree that you have the right to tell me. Maybe I should have. I chose not to, and to stand by my reasoning, and they said, do it now or you're fired. So as a now single mother of 3 kids, one already in college, I knew that I had to do it to support my kids, my family. But that night before, I couldn't sleep, and I just prayed, and I said, Lord, tell me what to do. Give me a sign. Smack me upside the head, because if you are gonna tell me to walk, then I'll walk, and I'll figure it out, and somehow I'll find a job, and I'll support these kids. If you tell me to take it, I'll take it too. And I woke up the next morning, and I got in the shower, and I had this bathroom that needed to be renovated. It was so ugly. The marble was this swirly brown ugliness. And for some reason, when I was in the shower, I opened my eyes, and that ugly, swirly brown marble, I looked in the same spot I did 10,000 times, and it was an angel. I saw that marble with an angel, and I'm telling you, that angel was moving, and I was breathless, and I thought, that's my sign. Go ahead, do it. You're gonna be okay. I got dressed, and I drove to the pharmacy. It was in some grocery store, and I sat in the car for 10 minutes crying, saying, what am I doing? Look, I am caving. What a loser I am. But I'd been given the sign, and I walked in, and the nurse looked at me, and she said, sweetheart, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm being forced to do this to my body, and I don't want to do it. And this sweet woman looked at me, held my hand, and said, this is so wrong, and I'm so sorry. And when she put that in my arm, my life changed. Something in me changed, where I knew that, number one, I caved to do what I thought I needed to do at that moment to support my family. And number two, never again. So I drove home, and I had previously agreed to do a podcast with Jay Cutler, the former Chicago Bears, Denver Broncos quarterback, and it was a favor to a friend who said, he just started his podcast and he needs a woman, will you do it? Okay. So his research team did a good job, and we talked about many things that ended up being controversial, but the one I'll focus on now is my opinion on the vax. And it was a warm day in Connecticut in September, and I had a short sleeve shirt on, and I had just come from getting the shot, and there was a Band-Aid on my arm, and he asked at first, he's like, hey, can I talk about the vaccine stuff? I was like, sure. He brought it up at that point, and he said, what is that? And I laughed, and basically I said, I think it's sick and wrong for any company to force their employees to do something to their body. However, I need my job, and I love my job. And here we are. Those words did not sit very well, I guess I should say, with Disney. And as soon as the podcast dropped, I got many phone calls from agents, from bosses, and said, basically, you're in trouble, and we're taking you off the air, and we're suspending you, and we're taking your assignments away, and you're gonna issue a public apology. So it's interesting, I look at Jimmy Kimmel, I look at a lot of people right now who said all kinds of things, and all I said was, I think it's wrong that someone forces me to do something to my body, but then I complied. So it's interesting how people pick and choose. And at that moment, the fear came back, because I realized me being true to myself while complying was not okay. So I was suspended, taken off the air, all my assignments taken away, and darkness and fear, and the internet crushing me. I was already a sellout, and not black enough, and a right-wing nut job, and all of the things. And then on top of this, I was done. And then while I was suspended, I got really, really sick with COVID, of course. To the point that one night, I was up all night, my heart was beating through my chest, and I'm like, what is happening? And I literally thought I was dying. I'd never felt like that in my life. And I said, hey, this is it. Again, I'm divorced, I'm alone, I'm sick, so the kids are with their dad. And I said, I gotta take myself to the hospital. And I woke up, I hadn't showered in 3 days. I had to take a quick shower, and when I stood up, I fell over, and I collapsed. And I realized that if I got in the shower and fell again, I'm alone. No one will find me. I'll die here, potentially. So I got back in bed, and I prayed that I'd wake up the next morning. And if God woke me up, I would never disappoint him, and never give in, and never cave again. And I woke up. But what I don't ever want to forget that moment of darkness and fear, and reading all the hate and all the things that then what happens is you start to believe it about yourself. Maybe I am a sellout. Maybe I should have stayed quiet. But it's wrong, but my body, my choice. Like all of these things, and they make you doubt yourself, and it works. And fear, and fear, and fear. And eventually I went back to work, and the bosses told me, your coworkers are mad at you and they're disappointed, especially the women. And so they brought me back in with fear. And my mom and dad, during the suspension, during being very sick, despite my dad having not one but 2 kinds of cancer, going through chemotherapy at the time, they came and they picked their little girl up off the floor, and they said, you're going back to work, and you're not gonna let them win. And that first day back off suspension, my dad huddled up, the old football player and my dad, he huddled us up, and he said, we're gonna say a prayer. And it was St. Michael the Archangel, for all my Catholic friends, people who follow St. Michael in the audience. And this is the part that I always remember. Defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. And from that moment that I went back to work to my last day at ESPN, 22 months later, every single day when I drove in, I called my mommy and dad. Yes, I'm 52 years old and I still call them mom and dad. And we prayed that before I walked in that building every single day. I felt like I was protected and in a bubble, and I know now that I was. I actually did my best work from that moment there to the day I left, because I knew that I was protected. The fear lessened. And as I was silenced during that time, and after certainly when I went back to work, because then it was just like, shut up, I need that paycheck. I realized my coworkers, their voices got louder and louder and louder. And as I stayed silent to keep my job and begged for my assignments to eventually come back, my coworkers could go on an NBA show and talk about how disgusted they were that Roe versus Wade was overturned on an NBA show. Or let's have a moment of silence for the alleged Don't Say Gay bill in the state of Florida on a women's basketball show. So I'm confused. I'm here just talking about my body, my choice, but complying with your rules on an off day on a podcast that has nothing to do with ESPN, but then we can go on ESPN airwaves to talk about abortion and all these things that, frankly, when you go to ESPN, is that what you want to hear? You're going for football, you're going for basketball, you're going to yell that the Titans are probably not going to make it to the playoffs again. You're going to do all of these things. That's what we're there for, to listen to you. We're your shrink for that, not for everything else. And I just didn't understand. And as they allowed them but continued to punish me, I said enough. And I called a friend, Chris Harrison, who also ABC, Disney, The Bachelor host, just married me 2 weeks ago, who also got canceled by the left. And he said, I have someone you need to speak with, and it was my attorney. I'd never hired an attorney in my life, but I learned a lot. And I realized there is a First Amendment pillar in there a little bit, not with the government, et cetera, it's a private employer. In the state of Connecticut, what we didn't know is that you are protected, that you can actually criticize your employers if you are complying with their rules, and I was. But most importantly, it was the principle. It was the principle that you allow some to speak up and not others. Which one is it? I follow your rules. Pick one. So I decided to file a lawsuit. Fear. They're gonna hate me, they're gonna get rid of me. I would too if someone was suing me, I guess, but at the end of the day, why? And I knew at that point it was bigger than me. I'm gonna be long gone. But what about all my other conservative friends who didn't have the platform I had, or didn't have the financial security that I had, who would come up to me in the bathroom and whisper and say, please, please, please keep talking. I knew I had to do it for them too. And the night before the lawsuit dropped, I went to each one of my kids, one in college, two in high school, and just said, this is what's coming, guys, and I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. But it's wrong, and I need you to know that you don't have to defend me. If your teachers and coaches and other kids' parents come up to you, as they had before when your mom spoke up, just tell them, I don't agree with my mom all the time, but she has a right. Diversity of thought. And I have 2 daughters and a son. My son's in the middle. He should be sainted because of the 2 sisters. And each wanted a different reaction to what was to come. And my son, as I said, I'm so sorry, buddy, for what's coming, but I gotta do this. My son looked at me and said, Mom, it's about time you stood up for yourself. He was 17. So what we do as parents quite often is what? We stay quiet to protect ourselves, but more so to protect our kids. We don't want to embarrass our kids. We don't want them to have to suffer from things. We don't want to lose our job. Very valid reasons, but what are we doing? We're telling our kids to stand up and be strong and do the right thing when we're doing what? The harder right versus the easier wrong. We're quitting, but then we're setting a terrible example for our kids while expecting them to do better without setting that example. And I knew then that even though it was the ultimate David versus Goliath, little old me versus Disney, even if they crushed me and bled me dry and it would take all of 2.5 seconds financially, I was gonna win because my kids, they saw that Mom finally stood up. I had no idea they were watching the whole time. So know that as you choose to stay quiet, it is so costly. And now we know better than ever. September 10th, 2025, We knew before that. We knew before what happened to Charlie. But now we know better than ever, we cannot afford to not show our kids how to do it and to do it the right way. Not the ugly way, but to stand up for what is right.